Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and in this one, this is where the fun really starts because we have to try and fit an exhaust manifold in here. Alright, so those of you watching last week will have seen that I actually have put some steering in the car. I've still got a bit of reinforcing and stuff to do on the steering column, but that can come later when I'm rejigging everything. There were a few comments, there were a few people who are sort of upset or surprised that I used Toyota parts. I didn't use Alfa or Ferrari parts for these things, and you need to understand that this is hot rodding. This is what hot rodding is all about, is getting bits and pieces that you can find and make work. And one of the big reasons with Toyota over Alfa parts is Alfas are not as common and a lot harder to get the bits and pieces. And even with the Toyota parts, I had to mix and match several different models of car to get all the lengths and sizes that I needed to actually make this fit and work. Because I have an early 90s Corolla steering rack, and then I have a Toyota Hi-Ace linkage, and then I have a Toyota Yaris steering column with a Corolla steering wheel. So these things are all mixed and matched to make it all work, and because they are so readily available and there's so many different sizes, I can join them all together without cutting and welding, which you can't do on steering parts. They need to be as they came because it's a safety issue, obviously. You don't want the steering wheel to snap off suddenly when you're when you're driving down the road at whatever speed this car will do. And I think it's unanimous. I am definitely going to keep these seats. So now, because I have my steering column in, the steering shaft going through the engine bay, I now have the space I need to know to make my exhaust manifolds, and there is not much room. Let me take you down there and I'll show you what I mean. So where I am down here now, I'm under the car. You can see here is the flywheel, and I have to make an exhaust come through this hole right here. Now, I've put my 90-degree fitting on from Racework. So this is my oil return coming from the oil tank, the dry sump tank, and going back into the engine. And here's my steering shaft here, and I have to make somehow an exhaust come through this little tiny hole here. There's not a lot of room. Okay, so it is going to be very tight in that engine bay, and obviously this factory Ferrari exhaust manifold is definitely not going to fit. There is nowhere near enough room for this to get in the engine bay. So thankfully Chris, who designed my adapter plate for the engine to gearbox conversion, also at the same time took one of these exhaust manifolds and made up the pattern for these flanges that are going to go bolt onto the Ferrari engine. Obviously these match what are on here. So using these flanges, I'm going to make up my own exhaust manifold. Now, I would like a better merge collector. There are merge collectors that are actually a slip fit one, and they've actually sort of tapered the pipes together, and this is all I could get locally at the time. Because this is quite small compared to, say, an LS engine. On an LS engine, you generally use 1 3/4 inch mandrel bends. On this engine, this is all 1.5 inch. So I'm going back with what the factory is. So it's 1.5 through to 2.5. That will be twin 2.5 going through the car. That's the way I'm going to run it. So I've got a bunch of these 1.5 inch bends, which is handy because if it was 1 3/4, there's no way it was fitting. This 1.5 is small enough that I should be able to get them all to fit. I've got a bunch of these bends. I haven't actually made an exhaust manifold before, so it's going to be fun to test it out. While Chris was at designing these for me, he also designed up this, which is basically, this is a big plate so that I can bolt these exhaust flanges on and then weld up my exhaust manifold off the car, and this will hold it nice and solid and be a heat sink and all the rest of it. The trouble is the guy that cut this out obviously was not having a good day when he did it, because this is miles off. You can even see from there that these holes should be all in line, and this one's like down and the angle, nothing bolts up. It's all over the place. So I'm going to still use this plate, but I'm going to have to rejig it and re-drill the hole. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to, using my factory manifold, I'm going to re-drill these holes and make it so I can bolt it onto here, and that way I can build my exhaust manifold on the bench. Okay, well that's phase one done. I have my jig to make my manifolds up. This is super thick, it's 12 mil steel plate, so it's nice and solid. It should be a nice solid base to work from to start building my exhaust manifolds off of. One little tip that I was scratching my head because I was trying to work out how I mark the holes on this inside because I couldn't get in, couldn't get a pen in here, and I just marked the holes on the other side, and as they are equal spaced, drilled them out first, swapped it around, bolted it on, and then I did the second side. So, little tip. All right, let's start having a look at what I'm going to do to get the things lined up in the car. That's the next step. Okay, let me explain what I've been doing down here for the last hour or so. So basically, it's hard to see, but up in here, this is a piece of scrap that I've welded between a flange that I bolted onto the side of the engine and my 4-to-1 collector. It's got about 10 mil gap between the steering rack and about 10 mil gap between the body of the car. It is super, super tight, but this is where I want it. So now I can unbolt this and take it out and do it on the bench. All right, and here is my abstract artwork that I've got going here. At the moment, I've got it out and it's sitting on the bench, but obviously it's not that robust. So I'm just gonna add a couple more braces to this just to keep it in the spot where I want it so that it's pretty firm and me bumping it around is not going to mess with it too much. And then we can start mocking up what I'm actually gonna do and how I'm actually gonna make this manifold. All right, so there's lots of different types of exhaust manifolds out there that people use, and ideally what you would like to do with something like this is to have a tune length manifold. So every single runner is exactly the same length going to the exhaust, so all the pulses are the same on both banks and make them identical. That can assist with power, it keeps everything nice, and I can't do that. I do not have the room. There is absolutely no way to get a tune length manifold in there. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to, at least there'll be individual runners. I mean, the worst manifold you can have is like a log manifold. They don't flow very well, and it's quite a simple method. Basically, you have just a big tube and just run all the runners straight into that tube, and that's about the easiest one you can do. I could fit that here. That would make my life much easier, but I don't want to do that. I want to make it as good as I can, but obviously using the space, the very, very, very limited space I have, I'm just going to have to do my best. So I've got a bunch of these 90-degree bends, and I'm going to start playing around with them to see if I can work out exactly how I can run this and where I can put it and how much space I really have, which is really not very much. All right, I want to thank the patrons again for this bandsaw. It's really helped out the build. I was actually trying to use it as the drop saw, and the trouble was if I wanted to cut this U shape in half to get two 90-degree bends, the edge would hit this frame of the bandsaw, so I couldn't use it as the drop saw. But thankfully, it actually has this table that I can bring out and actually turn it into a vertical bandsaw, so I can just sit it on and run the things through. I have to do it by hand, so I have to be a bit more careful, but I've used the cable tie trick again, so wrapping a cable tie around, because this one I want to cut straight on a straight piece of pipe. I've wrapped the cable tie around and used that to mark. That way you get a nice straight even line. So I'm going to cut this up and keep moving on. One runner in, I'm trying to sort of work out the best order to do them all so that I get them all in the right spots at the right time. We're getting there. It's coming together quite nice. The second runner will be going down to the bottom. The third I'm going to make come over the top, and then the fourth is going to do like a little squiggle down to the inlet. I'm trying to add a little bit of length on the last one if I can. Let's keep going. So some of this is still moving around. I need to sort of hold it in place and tack it, but I am really happy. Look at that. That is actually not a bad looking manifold. It's not tune length, as I said, but it's not too shabby. So the next job is to tack it all together and then see if they actually fit. And that is going to be the real test. So having this all apart, I managed to fit each one of these runners separately onto the engine itself so I could see if it all worked. There's not enough space to be able to put this manifold on with the engine in the car. These 3 runners seem like they fit reasonably well. I couldn't actually get this one on with the engine in the car because there's not enough space to slide it over the studs, but I'm pretty sure it should fit. But this runner here, it just needs to be tucked a bit tighter. I've actually marked it here. This is where it's actually touching an engine mount, which I can clear a bit, but there's plenty of space here for me to tuck this a bit tighter. So my challenge now is to cut it apart again and just see if I can get this to sit really nice and close in here and tuck it all together. All right, with a bunch of sectioning, I've actually managed to tie all this together, and that is much, much tighter in there. It's basically completely hugging all the way along. So I'm just going to MIG this up now and then test fit again, and hopefully it all clears. I think it's going to work. I think it's going to fit. It's all tight. There's not a lot of room there. There's not a lot of clearance, but I think it's going to fit. So you know what time it is. We're taking the engine out again. So I had to remove the steering linkage to actually be able to get the engine in. So that is going to be a bit of a pain, but it looks like it's the only way I'm going to be able to do it. But I'm still getting interference here on this second runner. So I'm going to have to change the track of that, put it a bit more forward. That should be doable. All right, I've rejigged this whole center pipe. This is sitting much lower, so it's much more parallel to this other tube now. I'm redoing this this second runner now. This is going to come, before it sort of came out this way and up a bit, and it was interfering, so I'm going to make it, I'm tucking it all as tight as I can. There's just no room in this car. I will mention, because a lot of you probably ask, I am doing this in mild steel. It's just much easier to work with than stainless, and I'm going to be getting it ceramic coated to try and keep some of the heat in. So that was my choice of that. Another thing I'll just mention is I actually made up this cheat for cutting my tube. So what I did is I got the full 360 tubes and traced around it, and I've marked on it 90 and 45 degree marks, and when I'm trimming a tube I'll just sit it on here, line it up, and then eyeball it, and that's been getting me quite a nice, neat, reasonably square cut to the square to the angle, so that I got a nice round tube that I'm welding onto a round tube. If you cut it on the wrong angle in the curve, you'll get a big oval and it'll make it really hard to weld together. So this is working quite well. I'm going to continue on now and just see if I can get this all just the way I want it. This tube here is clearing just, but we're far too tight here. I need to either tuck it more or do something because that's still not going to work. All right, that was a lot of work, but I have sunk this runner down as far as I can get it now. It's really deep down in there. I can only just get that nut off of there. Some of these gaps are far bigger than I would like. That is pretty ugly. Most of them are pretty good, but there's a couple that are not great. That's going to make it a bit of a pain to weld. But hopefully this goes, because if it doesn't, I'm going to be tearing my hair out. That's for sure. Okay, so I started trying to put the manifold on in separate pieces, and it's just too much of a juggling act, and I couldn't do it. So I ended up welding it all together up, just tacked it all together up around the collector up here. So I ended up remaking this lower bit, which actually fixed up. I got rid of a lot of those really gappy bits that I wasn't very happy with. So that's much neater, and there's like 3 less pieces here replaced with 1. So let's try it one more time. I really hope this fits. So we're looking top down into the gap in the engine, and you can see that these rear 2 tubes, there's plenty of clearance, there's no issues there. This front tube, that's clear, there's no dramas, but this tube in the middle here is touching this mount, and that is my final issue. So there's a couple of things I can do. There is that suspension mount that's sticking out into the engine bay. I can potentially see if I can clearance it a bit more. I've also been made aware that there is a roll center issue with the front of these cars from standard, and by lowering that point, I can actually do a roll center correction. So I might look into that a little bit more as well. That's another possibility. By lowering it down, it gives me roll center correction and gives me more space. I'm very close, but it was amazing how long it took to do the initial manifold. Was not a real problem, and if I had any more room, it would have been a breeze. I was so close from the start, but all of the tweaks, that's what just sucks up time, and that is all I'm going to get time to do today. I am happy with how it's coming together. It is driving me a bit crazy that it's still touching, but it is what it is. In any case, I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys. In the early 80s, Alfa Romeo's US sales were not going so well, and their American importer wanted a model to catch the public's attention. Well, that is when they approached Callaway, a company that today is known more for its Corvettes. Callaway put their engineers to work on a very special Alfa. They had twin turbos, the 2.5 litre V6, as well as twin intercoolers, Recaro seats, and suspension upgrade. The Alfa Romeo Callaway twin turbo took the standard Alfa from 154 horsepower to 230, and the quarter mile time from 16.1 down to 14.3. As good as it was, it didn't catch on, and only 35 examples were ever built.
All right, guys, well, today we have another episode of Mail Time, and today we've got a letter from Greece. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jeff, I'm writing from Artemis, Greece. My name is Tanassis. I am a big fan of your channel, and I'm waiting anxiously for every new episode of the Alfarrari project. For the past year or so, I've also been building from scratch 72 Alfa GT Junior. And the funny part is we seem to be following each other with the progress, the same parts and panels at the same time for the cars, which is nice. He's saying it's nice for him because it's his first project. And he sent us a couple of stickers from the official Hellenic Alfa Romeo Owners Club in Greece. So here they are. It's very cool. So these are some cool new additions for the wall. Well, I hope you've got your name right, Tanasis, but thank you very much. And if any of you have got anything you want to send through, you can send it through to Home Built by Jeff, PO Box 1520, Bowral, New South Wales 2576, Australia. Well, that didn't completely go as planned, and I still don't have a complete exhaust manifold on one side, but that's the difficult side. The other side's going to be much easier. That's something to tackle next week, and I've still got to do the internals in the collector. There's a bunch of stuff still to go, and I'll get there. I've already got some ideas about how I can re-manipulate it to get it to actually fit. It's just, it's one of these things. It's better to sleep on it and come back to it later.
And you can craft something like MacGyver used to do out of a elastic band and a paper clip.
That's the way. All right, guys.
Please like and subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, let us know
Join
what
us
you
on Patreon. Yeah, watch the videos a day early. Helps us get some more tools and stuff in the shop, which keeps me in here working longer. All right, guys. See you next time.
The cutaway. Ugh. Twin intercoolers. Oh my god, why would you say that? Like, that's... Like, what? Why? It didn't go very well. Took the 154 horsepower Alfa.
Alpha.